Hey guys, tonight we're going to step back in time, but not to a world of castles or knights. We're traveling to a period that built the modern world, forged in steam, iron, and, well, the tireless work of children. We are going to follow the story of you, a child at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, whose life is about to be turned upside down. It's a story that's often reduced to numbers and charts in history books, but tonight, we're going to feel it. A small heads up. Survival is not exactly a given here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to see where you're listening from. Let me know your city and the current time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see our little community scattered across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into 2 nights' journey together. The floor is cold beneath your bare feet, colder than usual. It's a damp, earthen cold that seems to creep up from the ground itself. A final, persistent reminder of the cottage you've always called home. Outside, a lone rooster crows, its call thin and sharp in the pre-dawn stillness. This is a sound you've heard every morning of your life, but today it sounds different. It sounds like goodbye. You don't need to be told that this is the last time. You can feel it in the silence of your mother, who is wrapping the last of the stale bread in a piece of worn cloth, her movements stiff and mechanical. You can see it in your father's back as he stands by the single, small window, staring out at a darkness that is not just the absence of light, but the absence of a future here. The air is thick with unspoken words, heavy with the weight of a life being dismantled. There isn't much to pack. A spare tunic, a wooden doll your grandfather carved for you years ago, its face smoothed by your own thumb, and a single, scratchy wool blanket that will have to serve the whole family. Everything else, the rickety table, the straw-stuffed mattresses, the small cooking pot is being left behind. They belong to the landlord now. They are part of the price of failure. You've seen the new fences going up over the past year, crisscrossing the common lands where your father used to graze the family S1 cow before she was sold. You've heard the whispers in the village, talk of enclosure and deficiency. It's a concept too big for you to grasp, but the results are simple enough. The fields that once grew food for people like you are now reserved for thousands upon thousands of sheep. Their wool, it seems, is worth more than your family's existence. This massive shift in land use, which historians call the enclosure movement, was the engine that pushed countless families like yours off the land they had worked for generations. As you step out of the doorway for the last time, the morning air is crisp with the smell of wet soil and wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. You take one last look at the low, thatched roof, the crooked wooden door, the small patch of earth where your mother tried to grow herbs. It's the only world you've ever known. Then now, you are turning your back on it. Your father takes your hand, his own rough and calloused. He doesn't look at you. He just looks forward, towards the dirt track that winds away from the village and disappears over the hill. The city, he mutters, more to himself than to anyone else. There's work in the city. It's a phrase you've heard him repeat like a prayer for weeks. It's a promise of something new. A place of towering buildings and endless noise HES only heard about from a passing merchant. Historians to this day still debate the nature of this great migration. Was it a journey of hope, a voluntary search for a better life and new opportunities, or was it simply a desperate flight from starvation, with no real choice at all standing there, with a hollow feeling in your stomach and your entire world contained in a small bundle? The distinction feels meaningless. You are leaving because you must. Here in the countryside, time has always been a gentle, flowing thing. It was measured by the sun's slow arc across the sky, the distant toll of the church bell, and the turning of the seasons. You know it's time to wake when the birds sing, and time to sleep when the sky darkens. You have no real concept of a minute or an hour as a rigid, unyielding unit. That is a lesson the city is waiting to teach you. For now, you just walk. placing one foot in front of the other, moving away from the sunrise and towards a smudge of smoke on the distant horizon. A place that promises everything and nothing at all. The journey takes days. The dirt track slowly gives way to a cobbled road, a path that feels harder and less forgiving under your tired feet. The world grows louder, the gentle sounds of nature replaced by the clatter of cartwheels, the shouts of drivers, and a low, constant hum that seems to vibrate in your bones. The air changes, too. It loses the clean scent of earth and rain and takes on a sharp, metallic tang, thick with the smell of coal, smoke, and unwashed bodies. You huddle closer to your family, a small, bewildered island in a river of strangers. You sleep in ditches by the side of the road, or huddled under the eaves of a barn if you're lucky. The bread your mother packed is gone by the second day, and the hunger that was a dull ache in the countryside becomes a sharp, cramping pain. You see your father's shoulders slump a little lower with each passing mile. The hope that had propelled him forward is beginning to fray, worn thin by exhaustion and the sheer, overwhelming reality of the city. It's on the fourth day, huddled in the shadow of a grimy brick wall on the outskirts of a town larger than any you could have imagined, that you meet him. He doesn't look like a villain. He's just a man, wearing a slightly too large coat and a hat that has seen better days. He approaches your family with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Looking for work, he asks, his voice friendly, almost gentle. Your father, weary but desperate, just nods. The man's eyes flick over to you and your siblings. HES not looking at you as a child, HES looking at you the way a farmer looks at livestock, assessing your size, your apparent health. The little ones are quick, he says, gesturing towards you with his chin. Good hands for the looms, strong. He introduces himself not as a recruiter, but as an agent for a mill owner. The man he describes as a philanthropist, a true gentleman who believes in giving poor folk a chance. He paints a picture of a wonderful new life. He doesn't talk about 14-hour days. He talks about learning a trade, a valuable skill that will set you up for life. He doesn't mention the dangerous machinery. He talks about a sturdy roof over your head in a place called an apprentice house, warm and dry. He promises 3 hot meals a day. To you, whose stomach feels like it's eating itself, this sounds like a palace and a feast fit for a king. This man is a key part of a vast, chillingly efficient system. Historically, these were oft unparish agents. Under the old poor laws, local parishes were financially responsible for their own poor. To cut costs, they would contract men like this to apprentice pauper children, effectively shipping them off to the new industrial towns, sometimes hundreds of miles away. It was a transaction disguised as charity, relieving the parish of a burden and providing the factories with a constant supply of cheap, powerless labor. The man reaches into his pocket and pulls out a few shillings, pressing them into your father's hand. A gesture of goodwill, he says, to help you get settled. The coins are a tangible weight, a concrete solution to the immediate problem of starvation. You watch your parents' faces. You see the conflict there, the deep, instinctual distrust of a deal that seems too good to be true, warring with the crushing weight of their desperation. This is a choice that historians still wrestle with today. Were parents who made these deals simply victims of a predatory system, forced into an impossible choice, or did they knowingly sacrifice their children for a small, immediate gain? Looking at your father's trembling hand as he closes it around the coins, you don't see a monster. You just see a man who has run out of options. As a strange, niche detail of this era, these agents often acquired local nicknames. In some desperate communities, they were unironically called the good man or the friend of the poor because they arrived with promises and, occasionally, a small bit of cash up front. They were masters of language, using words like opportunity, training, and guardianship to mask the reality of what was, for all intents and purposes, a form of bonded servitude. Their pay was often on a per-head basis, incentivizing them to gather as many children as possible, regardless of the conditions they were being sent to. He'll be well looked after, the man says, giving you a quick, dismissive pat on the head. The touch is brief, but it makes your skin crawl. It's a gesture of ownership. In that moment, a silent contract has been sealed. Your life is no longer your own, nor does it belong to your family. It now belongs to a mill owner whose name you don't even know. The man gives your father a slip of paper with a name and an address scrawled on it. He gives instructions: be at this gate at this time. He doesn't say goodbye to you. He just turns and melts back into the anonymous crowd. His job done, you are left standing there, the noise of the city pressing in on all sides. Your mother tries to smile at you, but her face crumbles. Your father won't meet your eyes. The coins are still clutched in his fist. A small, heavy price for a future you are now going to face alone. The address on the crumpled piece of paper leads you to a part of the city where the sky seems to have disappeared, swallowed by a permanent haze of gray smoke. The buildings are not like the small, scattered cottages of your village. They are immense, monolithic structures of soot-stained brick, packed so tightly together that they seem to be leaning on each other for support. And then you see it. The factory. It's not just a building, it's a beast. It squats over an entire block, a multi-story fortress of brick and iron. Its hundreds of windows stare out like vacant eyes, and from its core comes a sound that you feel more than you hear. It's a deep, rhythmic, thunderous noise, a constant, pounding heartbeat that seems to shake the very ground beneath your feet. A monstrous, metallic giant, breathing in coal and breathing out sick, black smoke from towering chimneys that claw at the sky. Your father guides you towards a massive iron gate, the entrance to the factory yard. The noise grows louder here, a deafening symphony of clanking, whirring, and hissing steam that overwhelms your senses. You have to shout to be heard over the din. This is the sound of the Industrial Revolution, the sound of progress. To you, it's the sound of fear. A stern-faced man with a ledger opens a small door set into the main gate and checks the paper your father hands him. He looks you up and down, his gaze as cold and impersonal as the man who first recruited you. He grunts, makes a tick in his book, and gestures for you to come inside. This is as far as you go, he says to your parents, his tone leaving no room for argument. This is it, the moment of separation. Your mother kneels, her face streaked with grime and tears, and pulls you into a hug that feels frantic. Desperate, she whispers her name, her voice cracking. Be good, be strong. Your father places a hand on your shoulder, a heavy, trembling weight. He opens his mouth to say something, but no words come out. He just gives you a small, helpless nod, and then the gatekeeper pulls you away, his grip firm on your arm. You are led through the gate, and it clangs shut behind you with a sound of finality, like a tomb being sealed. You watch through the iron bars as your parents become smaller and smaller, two lonely figures turning to be swallowed by the city's grimy streets. You are now inside the belly of the beast. The factory yard is a chaotic landscape of mud, coal heaps, and stacked bales of raw cotton. The air is so thick with smoke and dust that it hurts to breathe, making you cough and your eyes water. The sheer scale of everything is disorienting. Horse-drawn carts laden with raw materials rumble past, their drivers shouting. Men with soot-blackened faces haul heavy sacks, their bodies moving with a weary, practiced rhythm. It's a world of ceaseless, frantic motion. The gatekeeper leads you towards a towering brick building and through a heavy wooden door. If you thought it was loud outside, it was nothing compared to this. The noise inside is a physical force, an assault on your ears that makes your teeth ache. You find yourself in a vast, cavernous room, a forest of iron machinery stretching as far as you can see. Leather belts, as wide as your body, snake and slap from giant wheels on the ceiling down to the intricate workings of the machines on the floor, all spinning at terrifying speeds. This is a spinning room, filled with machines called spinning mules. They are long, automated frames that move back and forth on iron rails, drawing out the cotton fibers and twisting them into thread. The air is hot and humid, filled with the smell of machine oil and a blizzard of tiny white cotton fibers that float like snow, clinging to your hair and clothes. This ubiquitous cotton dust, or fly, was a notorious and deadly feature of the mills. Workers inhaled it constantly, leading to a debilitating, unfatal respiratory disease called by cyanosis, or brown lung. It was a slow, creeping illness that would scar the lungs over years. You see other children here, dozens of them. They are small, ghost-like figures, darting in and out of the moving machinery with a speed and agility that seems impossible. They are barefoot, their clothes are rags, and their faces are pale and smudged with grease. No one looks up as you are lead past. Their eyes are fixed on the machines, their expressions a mixture of intense concentration and utter exhaustion. They don't look like children playing, they look like tiny, worn-out adults. A man with a leather strap tucked into his belt approaches. He is the overseer, the one they call the gaffer. He doesn't introduce himself. He just points to a spinning mule. Watch, he barks, his voice cutting through the noise. He grabs a small boy, no older than you, and shoves him towards the machine. He demonstrates your future. This spinning frame rolls out, stretching the threads. When it rolls back in, the boy darts underneath it, sweeping the floor clear of fallen cotton waste. He has to be quick, moving in the few seconds before the heavy frame, weighing hundreds of pounds, rolls back over the space where he just was. It's a terrifying dance between the child and the machine. Historians still debate the extent to which mill owners were aware of, or even cared about, these daily dangers. Some records show owners expressing concern, while ledgers from other mills reveal a calculated acceptance of injury and death as a simple cost of doing business. For you, standing there, the academic debate is irrelevant. You are simply watching a child, just like you risk his life, over and over, for a few scraps of cotton fluff. Then you know, with a cold, sinking certainty, that this is now your world. The overseer, satisfied that you have witnessed the grim reality of your new occupation, grabs your arm again and pulls you away from the deafening roar of the spinning room. He leads you out of the main factory building and across the muddy yard, towards a separate, slightly smaller, but equally grim-looking brick building. This, he grunts, is the apprentice house, your new home. The door groans open into a long, low silencing room. The air inside is stale and heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and cheap, boiled food. It's a smell that clings to the back of your throat. The only light comes from a few small, grime-caked windows set high in the walls, casting long, dusty beams into the gloom. The first thing you notice is the sound, or rather, the relative lack of it. After the thunder of the factory, the dormitory is filled with a different kind of noise, the chorus of hacking coughs, tired moans, and the quiet, exhausted breathing of dozens of children. This is the main sleeping chamber. There are no individual beds. Instead, long, rough-hewn wooden platforms line the walls, covered with thin, lumpy mattresses stuffed with straw and rags. There are no sheets, just a scattering of coarse, gray blankets, many of them threadbare. This is the bed you will share, not with one or two others, but with as many bodies as can be crammed onto the platform. An older woman, with a face as sour undrinkled as a dried apple, emerges from a corner. She is the matron of the apprentice house. Her job is not to care for you, but to manage you. Like Lestat, she looks you over, notes your relatively clean clothes from the country, and scoffs. He won't last a week looking like that, she mutters to the overseer. She points to his space on one of the platforms. That's his spot. Don't let him bring any dirt in. The overseer leaves without another word, and you are left in the care of the matron. She shoves a wooden bowl and a spoon into your hands and points towards a large, steaming cauldron in the corner. That's your dinner. You won't eat it until the shift is over. Hours from now. Then she points to your small bundle of belongings. No room for dolls here, she says, snatching the little wooden figure your grandfather carved. For a moment, you think she's going to throw it in the fire, but she just tucks it into her apron pocket. It's hers now. You have been stripped of your last connection to your old life. You sit on the edge of the hard wooden platform, your designated spot, and take in the scene. A few children who are either too sick to work or on a different shift are lying on the straw mattresses. They stare at you with dull, incurious eyes. They've seen new arrivals like you come and go. One boy is racked by a deep, chesty cough that shakes his entire small frame, the mill fever, the grimly accepted term for the combination of pneumonia, bronchitis, and by SSI noses that plague the dormitories. The sleeping arrangements were one of the most brutal aspects of this life. The system was often called hot bedding, because the factories ran day and night. The beds were never empty. As one shift of children rummaged out to the factory floor, the exhausted children from the previous shift would climb into the still warm spots they had just vacated. The beds and the blankets were in constant use, never aired, and crawling with lice and fleas. This is a detail that shocked even contemporary observers, with some social reformers of the time describing the apprentice houses as seminaries of vice and disease. You notice the state of the other children's clothes. They are patched, ray-patched, and stained with grease and grime until the original color is a distant memory. The concept of hygiene is non-existent. There is a single pump in the yard for washing, but access to it is limited, and soap is a luxury you will never see. The matron's primary concern is not your health, but ensuring you are awake and ready for the next shift. As you sit there, a strange and specific detail catches your eye. On the wall above one of the sleeping platforms, someone has scratched a crude drawing into the brick, a simple, childlike drawing of a tree in the sun. It's a tiny, defiant act of remembering a world outside these walls, a world of green fields and open sky. You wonder who drew it, and if they are still here. The academic debate around the apprentice houses often centers on intent. Were they truly, as some mill owners claimed in parliamentary inquiries, a benevolent form of housing that provided food and shelter to destitute children who would otherwise be on the streets, or were they, as critics argued, little more than private prisons designed to house a captive workforce, maximizing profit by minimizing every possible expense related to human well-being? As you look around at the filthy straw, the sick children, and the utter lack of comfort or care, the answer seems painfully obvious. Later that night, long after the sun has set, the children from the day shift stumble in, their faces gray with exhaustion. They don't speak. They move like ghosts, finding their spots on the platforms and collapsing, some not even bothering to eat the slop offered to them. You are shoved onto your designated spot between two other small bodies. The scratchy blanket is pulled over all three of you. It's crowded, it smells, and the boy next to you is shivering with fever. But you are so profoundly tired from your journey and the shock of the day that sleep comes quickly. It's a heavy, dreamless sleep, the kind that offers no rest, only a temporary escape before the whole cycle begins again in the darkness. It feels like you've only just closed your eyes when a sharp, rapping sound shatters the thin veil of your sleep. It's not a knock on the door. It's a rhythmic, insistent tapping coming from directly outside the grimy window high up on the wall. Tap, tap, tap. The sound is sharp and metallic, designed to cut through the deepest exhaustion. You sit up, disoriented in the pitch-black dormitory. The air is cold and stale. Around you, the other children are stirring, groaning and coughing as they are dragged from their brief slumber. The tapping continues, relentless. The boy next to you, his face barely visible in the gloom, mutters a single word, "Knock her up." This is your introduction to one of the most peculiar and essential professions of the industrial city, the knocker-up. In an age before alarm clocks were common or affordable, it was the knocker-up's job to wake the workers. They would walk the dark, sleeping streets in the pre-dawn hours, armed with a long pole, often made of bamboo, to reach the upper windows of the tenements and apprentice houses. They would tap on the window pane until a light appeared inside or they saw some sign of movement, confirming the occupants were awake. They wouldn't leave until the job was done, as their pay depended on the workers getting to the factory on time. You squint at the window and can just make out the silhouette of a long stick poking up from the street below. It's a strangely intimate, yet impersonal interaction. This person, whom you will likely never meet, is the first voice of authority you hear each day. Their tapping is the sound that signals the end of rest and the beginning of another grueling shift. It is the metronome that sets the pace for your entire existence. There's no gentle waking here. The matron storms through the dormitory, pulling blankets off anyone who is too slow to rise. Her voice is harsh. Up, on your feet. The factory waits for no one. There's no time to wash, no time to think. You are herded out of the sleeping quarters and into a larger common room where the cauldron of porridge from last night is still simmering. A bowl of grey, lumpy oat gruel is slapped down in front of you. It's thin, watery, and barely warm. It has no taste, or rather, it tastes of the smoky, metallic air of the factory itself. You are so hungry you will fit down, but it's like a stone in your stomach. This is the fuel for the next 14 hours of labor. The diet of factory apprentices was a subject of much controversy and investigation, while some benevolent owners, like Robert Owen, provided relatively nutritious food. The vast majority served the cheapest possible fare oatmeal, potatoes, and black bread, a monotonous and nutrient-poor diet designed for bare subsistence. A fascinating and grim little detail about the knocker-up profession is the variety of tools they used. While long poles were common for upper floors, for ground floor windows, some used a short stick with a wire or knob on the end. Others, believe it or not, used pea shooters, firing dried peas at the window panes to create a sharp, rattling sound. It was a skilled job. You had to wake your client without waking the whole house or, worse, breaking the glass. Historians still debate the social standing of these individuals. Were they seen as helpful community figures, or as reviled extensions of the factory owner's control, the bringers of the daily misery for you? In this moment, the knocker-up is simply a faceless herald of the day's labor. Once the meager breakfast is consumed, the children form a ragged line and are marched out of the apprentice house and across the yard towards the factory. The sun has not yet begun to rise. The yard is lit by a few flickering gas lamps that cast long, dancing shadows, making the factory loom even more menacingly in the darkness. The air is bitingly cold, and you shiver in your thin tunic as you join the river of other workers shuffling towards the entrance. You see the knocker-up for the first time. He is a stooped, elderly man in a long coat, his pole resting on his shoulder. He's already moving on to the next street. His job here done, he is just one small cog in the great machine of the industrial clock, a machine that has now claimed you. You step back into the spinning room. The noise, the heat, and the thick, cotton-filled air hit you like a physical blow. The machines are already running, their rhythmic clatter and whirring a constant, depressive roar. The overseer, the man they call the gaffer, is waiting. He doesn't greet you. He simply points towards one of the massive spinning mules. Your real education is about to begin. You are no longer a child from the countryside. You are no longer your parents' son or daughter. You are a factory hand, a tiny, replaceable part of a process you don't understand, summoned from sleep by the tap-tap-tap of a stranger's pole against a dirty window pane. The day has begun. You're a scavenger, the overseer barks, his voice barely audible over the deafening roar of the machinery. He points to the space beneath the giant, moving carriage of a spinning mule. That's your place. Keep it clean. He doesn't offer any more instruction than that. He simply watches, his arms crossed, his presence a heavy, intimidating shadow. An older boy, maybe 10 years old, is tasked with showing you what to do. He doesn't speak to you, he just demonstrates. As the massive, wheeled carriage of the mule slides outward on its track, stretching the delicate cotton threads, he darts into the gap underneath. He scurries along the floor, his body low to the ground, using his hands and a small brush to sweep up the scraps of cotton fluff the fly that have fallen. Then, as the carriage begins its journey back, he scrambles out, clearing the track just moments before the heavy machinery rolls over the spot where his head and body had been. He does it with a practiced, thoughtless speed that tells you he has performed this action thousands of times. Now, it's your turn. You hesitate. The machine is terrifying. It's a behemoth of iron and wood, moving with a relentless, rhythmic power that seems both alive and utterly indifferent to your existence. The space beneath it is cramped and dark, slick with oil and littered with sharp metal bits. Get in there, the overseer shouts, giving you a hard shove from behind. You stumble forward and half fall, half crawl into the gap. The carriage is at the far end of its run, giving you a few precious seconds. The floor is gritty and cold. You can feel the vibration of the entire factory through the soles of your bare feet and the palms of your hands. You frantically mimic the other boy, sweeping the cotton waste into a small pile. Then you hear it a loud clank and a whirring sound. The carriage is starting to move back. Panic seizes you. You scramble backward, crab-like, bumping your head on the low-hanging iron bar. For a terrifying second, you think you're not going to make it. You tumble out into the aisle, just as the mule's wheels roll past, missing your feet by inches. The overseer laughs, a short, cruel bark. Too slow, he says. You'll be quicker tomorrow, or you'll be flatter. This was the job of the scavenger, or piecer scavenger. One of the most common and most dangerous roles for the youngest children in the spinning mills. Their small size and agility made them ideal for crawling under the active machinery. The risk was constant and immense. A moment of inattention, a stumble, or the sheer exhaustion from a 14-hour day could lead to horrific injuries, crushed limbs, scalping if their hair got caught, or even death. These dangers were so well known that they became a central point of testimony in the parliamentary commissions that would later investigate child labor. You spend the next several hours in this terrifying rhythm. Wait for the carriage to move out. Dart in, sweep, scramble out. Repeat, over and over. Your back begins to ache from crouching, and your knees and hands are raw from the rough, oily floor. The air you breathe is a thick soup of cotton dust that gets in your eyes, your nose, and coats the back of your throat, making you cough. One of the more peculiar and less discussed aspects of this job was the culture that developed around it. Children became experts in the specific sounds of their machines. They could tell by a subtle change in the rhythm or a new squeak if something was wrong, or if the carriage was moving slightly faster or slower than usual. Their survival depended on this intimate, auditory relationship with the machine that threatened them. It was a form of sensory knowledge born from pure necessity. As the hours drag on, your movements become more automatic, your fear dulling into a state of tense, anxious exhaustion. You learn to time your entry and exit not by sight, but by the specific sequence of clank S and wear S that signal the machine's cycle. You are, in a very real sense, becoming a part of the machine yourself. Historians have long debated the mindset of the overseers who enforced this brutal labor. Were they sadistic tyrants who enjoyed the power they held over children? As many popular accounts and novels of the eras suggest, or were they themselves caught in a relentless system, their own wages often tied to the productivity of their section, forcing them to push the children to their absolute limits to avoid their own financial ruin or dismissal? The reality, as is often the case, was likely a spectrum. For every notoriously cruel overseer, there were others who were simply numb, desensitized by the daily grind and the normalization of risk. You don't think about any of this. You only think about the machine. Its outward journey is a brief moment to breathe. Its inward journey is a threat to be outrun. Your world has shrunk to the 3 feet of grimy floorboards beneath this single spinning mule. You are no longer a child from the countryside. You are a scavenger, crawling in the dirt, your life measured in the perilous few seconds between the movements of a steel giant. The day has barely begun, and it already feels like an eternity. After a few days of crawling on the floor as a scavenger, the overseer decides you are ready for a new task. Your hands, he notes, are small and nimble. This makes you a candidate for a slightly more complex and equally relentless job of PCR. He pulls you away from the spinning wheel you've come to know with a mixture of terror and familiarity. He leads you to a different kind of machine, a throw streetler or a water frame, where the finished thread is wound onto hundreds of rapidly spinning bobbins. The noise here is different, less of a thunderous clanking and more of a high-pitched, constant whirring that fills the air and seems to vibrate inside your skull. Your new job seems simple in theory. You are to watch the rows upon rows of threads stretching between the rollers and the bobbins. When a thread breaks, which happens constantly due to the speed of the machine and the quality of the rock-on, it is your job to fix it. You must grab the two broken ends and, with a quick, deft twist of your fingers, knot them back together. An older girl, her face pale and her fingers moving in a blur, shows you the motion. It's a specific, practiced flick of the wrist and fingers. It has to be done instantly. A broken thread means a flaw in the final cloth. And worse, it can cause a tangle that could jam the machine. A jammed machine means lost time, and lost time is the greatest sin in the factory. You try to mimic her, but your fingers are clumsy. The thread is fine, almost like a spider's web, and the bobbins are spinning so fast, they are just a blur. You drop the ends. You fumble the knot. The first time you try, the overseer is watching. He slaps the back of your head. Faster, he grunts. Your fingers are worth more than your brain. Use them. The work is maddeningly repetitive. You stand for hours in one spot, your eyes scanning the endless field of white threads, waiting for that tiny flutter that signals a break. When you see one, your body has to react instantly. Reach in, find the ends, tie the knot, and move on to the next. There is no time to rest, no time to stretch. Your entire focus is narrowed to this single, repetitive task. Your fingers, at first clumsy, begin to learn the motion through sheer, brutal repetition. They also begin to hurt. The fine cotton thread, cold cotton moving at speed, is surprisingly abrasive. It cuts and chafes your fingertips, leaving them raw and sore. Small nicks and cuts are common, and there's no time to tend to them. A spot of blood on the cotton could stain it, which is a punishable offense, so you learn to suck on a cut finger to clean it before getting back to work. This is where the physical toll of the labor becomes deeply personal. Your body is being reshaped by the machine. After a few weeks, the skin on your fingertips will harden into calluses. Your back and neck will develop a permanent ache from stooping over the machine. Your eyes will burn from staring at the vibrating threads for hours on end in the dim, flickering gaslight. One of the strange, niched skills of an expert piece was the ability to work with both hands almost independently, and often without looking. An experienced child could tie a knot with their right hand, while their eyes were already scanning further down the machine for the next break. It was a level of machine-human integration that was both incredible and horrifying. They didn't just operate the machine, they were a living, twitching component of it. Historians still debate the psychological impact of this kind of labor. Did the intense focus and repetitive nature of the work lead to a kind of meditative, trance-like state that made the long hours bearable, or did it, as many reformers claimed, stunt the intellectual and emotional development of children, turning them into unthinking automatons? Testimonies from former child laborers often describe a state of mental numbness, a shutting down of the mind as the only way to endure the endless shift. The danger here is different from the immediate, crushing threat of the scavenger's mule. It's a danger of speed and proximity. Reaching into the fast-moving machinery to tie a thread requires precision. A moment's hesitation, or getting a piece of loose clothing caught in a roller or a spinning spindle, could be catastrophic. You see an older boy yelp as his finger gets pinched between two gears. The overseer just pulls him away, wraps a dirty rag around the bleeding finger, and pushes him back to his station. Work through it, he orders. The machine doesn't stop for you. You are paid by the piece. Or rather, the factory is. The wages you are supposedly earning are docked for every mistake, for every yard of imperfect thread. This piecework system was a brutally effective way to ensure maximum effort. It wasn't about working a certain number of hours, it was about producing a certain quota. Failure to meet the quota resulted in punishment, often a beating or, more commonly, a fine that would be deducted from a wage you would never even see. So you stand there, your small body tense with concentration. Your world is the whirring of the bobbins and the sea of white threads. Your fingers fly, tying knot after knot, hour after hour. You are no longer a scavenger crawling in the dark. You are a pieceur, a living part of the machine. Your worth measured by the speed of your fingertips. In this world of relentless noise and motion, you quickly learn that the most dangerous machine isn't made of iron and steam. It's made of flesh and blood, and it walks the factory floor on two legs. This is the overseer, the gaffer, or slumber, as the children sometimes whisper amongst themselves. His shadow is a geography of fear. He doesn't have a specific station. His domain is the entire room, and his job is to patrol it, a predator circling his territory. He moves with a slow, deliberate pace, his eyes constantly scanning, not just the machines, but the children who tend them. He is looking for any sign of slowness, any moment of distraction, any lapse in the rigid discipline of the factory floor. You learn to sense his presence without even looking up from your work. There's a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a tensing in the shoulders of the children around you. You develop a kind of sixth sense, an awareness of where he is at all times. This constant, low-level vigilance is almost as exhausting as the physical labor itself. His methods of enforcement are varied and cruel. The most common is the strap, a thick leather belt that he carries tucked into his own belt or looped over his shoulder. Each child caught talking, leaning against a post to rest for a moment, or working too slowly will feel the sharp sting of the strap across their back or legs. It's a swift, casual act of violence, meant not just to punish the offender, but to serve as a warning to everyone else. But the punishments are not always so straightforward. There is a chilling creativity to the cruelty. You see a small girl who keeps nodding off at her station. The overseer doesn't just hit her. He drags her to the cistern, a large vat of cold water used for cleaning the machinery, and dunks her head in. She emerges sputtering and shivering, her thin clothes soaked through. She will have to work the rest of her 14-hour shift in those wet clothes, the cold seeping into her bones. This was a common punishment, grimly referred to as wetting, for more serious offenses, like a costly mistake that damages a machine. There is the practice of waiting. The overseer will tie a heavy weight to the child's neck and force them to walk up and down the factory aisles for an hour, a public spectacle of humiliation and pain. The weights are often parts of broken machinery, a stark symbol of their crime. The relationship between the children and the overseer is a complex one. He is the source of their daily terror, but he is also the ultimate authority, the one who dictates every aspect of their working lives. Some children, out of fear or a desperate desire for favor, become informants, telling the overseer about others who are slacking or breaking rules. This creates an atmosphere of distrust, making true solidarity among the children difficult and dangerous. One of the more bizarre and little-known punishments, documented in some testimonies, involved shaming. A child who made a mistake might have their ears nailed to their workbench for a period of time, or be forced to wear a cap with the word dunce or lazy scrawled on it. The psychological torment was considered just as effective a tool as physical pain. Historians who study the factory system are often faced with a difficult question: how widespread was this extreme brutality? Mill owners, when questioned by parliamentary committees, often claimed that such practices were error, the actions of a few bad apple overseers whom they would dismiss if discovered. However, the sheer volume of testimony from former child laborers suggests that while the most sadistic punishments might not have happened every day, a culture of physical discipline and casual violence was the norm. not the exception. The system itself, which prioritized production above all else, implicitly sanctioned these methods. The overseer's own job depended on the output of his section, creating a direct incentive for brutality. You learn the rules of survival. Never look the overseer in the eye. Never speak unless spoken to. Never, ever stop moving. You learn to make your hands look busy even when there is a brief lull in the work. You learn to eat while working, hiding a crust of bread in your pocket and taking furtive bites when the overseer's back is turned, because the official meal breaks are shortened, often skipped. One afternoon, the thread you are trying to piece keeps breaking. It's pure quality cotton, weak and brittle. It's not your fault, but the overseer doesn't care about excuses. He sees your machine is producing less than the one next to it. He comes over, his face grim. You flinch, expecting the strap, but he just stares at you, his expression cold. "You cost me money," he says, his voice low and menacing. "Tonight, you get no supper." That, you learn, is another of his tools. The denial of food is more terrifying than a beating. A beating is over in a moment, but the gnawing emptiness of hunger will stay with you for hours, making the work harder. Your fingers clumsier, and the next day's labor an even more daunting prospect. As he walks away, you understand. The overseer isn't just a man. He is the physical embodiment of the factory's logic, ruthless, impersonal, and utterly unforgiving. His shadow is long, and there is no place on this factory floor to escape it. The bell finally rings. It sounds shrill and jarring, signaling the end of the shift. But it doesn't bring a feeling of relief, only a wave of bone-deep exhaustion. Your body, which has been held tense and upright for 14 hours, suddenly slumps. Every muscle screams in protest. You and the other children shuffle out of the spinning room, a silent, gray-faced column of ghosts. The sudden quiet of the factory yard, broken only by the distant hum of the night shift starting up, is as disorienting as the noise was. You are herded back into the apprentice house, into the common room where you had your meager breakfast what feels like a lifetime ago. In the center of the room, the same large iron cauldron sits over a low fire, tended by the sour-faced matron. This is supper. The smell hits you first. It's not the promising aroma of roasting meat or baking bread you sometimes remember from your village. It's a bland, starchy smell. The matron ladles a scoop of the contents into the wooden bowl you were given. You look down at it. It's a thick, grayish-white paste-out gruel, the same as breakfast. Sometimes, if the matron is in a slightly better mood or if the factory owner is due for an inspection, there might be a few small, boiled potatoes thrown in, or perhaps a chunk of coarse, dark bread on the side. Tonight, there is nothing, just the gruel. Because of the overseer's punishment, you are supposed to be denied this meal. As the matron approaches you, she looks at the list in her hand, then at your face. She hesitates. She could follow the order to the letter, but then she looks at your small, exhausted frame and does something unexpected. She ladles a half portion into your bowl. "Don't let him see," she mutters, her voice not kind, but merely pragmatic. A child who faints from hunger tomorrow is a useless worker. Her act is not one of compassion, but of asset management. You take your bowl and find a spot on the floor. You are too tired to even sit on the benches. You eat with your spoon, then use your fingers to scrape the last remnants from the bowl. The gruel is thick and sticks to the roof of your mouth. It has almost no flavor, but it is hot, and it begins to fill the painful, hollow space in your stomach. This was the staple diet for the majority of factory apprenticism, a monotonous rotation of oatmeal porridge, boiled potatoes, and occasionally a soup made from scraps of bone and vegetable peelings. Meat was a rarity, a luxury reserved for holidays. If at all, the food was chosen for one reason: it was cheap and calorie-dense enough to keep a child working. Nutrition, taste, and variety were not considerations. This poor diet had devastating long-term consequences. Malnutrition was rampant, leading to stunted growth. weak bones, rickets, and a host of other deficiency-related diseases. The children were chronically underweight and smaller than their rural counterparts. Historians have used skeletal remains from this period to confirm this, showing clear evidence of developmental stress and nutritional deficiencies in the bones of urban workers compared to those from the countryside. It is a stark, physical record of the human cost of industrialization. A strange and often overlooked detail about factory food was its frequent adulteration. To cut costs even further, unscrupulous suppliers would mix other substances into the food. Chalk or ground bone was sometimes added to flour to make it heavier. Sand or dust might be mixed into sugar. The oatmeal you're eating might be bulked up with less savory, cheaper grains, or even sawdust. There were no food safety regulations, and the apprentice children were in no position to complain. As you eat, you watch the other children. There is no conversation, no laughter, just the sound of spoons scraping against wooden bowls. Some are so tired they fall asleep with their heads on the table, their supper half-eaten. Others eat with a desperate, animalistic hunger. You see an older boy finish his portion and then at the bowl of a smaller child who has fallen asleep. For a moment, you see the flicker of a cruel calculation in his eyes. But then the matron looks his way, and he slumps back down. Hunger makes you desperate, but fear is still the dominant force. The academic debate here often revolves around the owner's knowledge of these conditions. Did they know the food was this poor? Some certainly did, and viewed it purely as a line item on a budget, to be minimized. Others, living far from the mills, may have been presented with doctored reports from their managers, showing menus that were far more generous than the reality. Some reformers, like John Fielden, a mill owner himself who campaigned for better conditions, published the exact, grim diet plans from his own and other factories to expose the truth. Finishing your meager half portion, the gnawing pain in your stomach has subsided to a dull ache. It's not satisfaction, just the absence of acute hunger. You are still weak, still profoundly tired. You know that this small bowl of paste is all the energy you will get to face the knocker-up step in just a few short hours. It is the fuel for the machine, and you are the machine. You get up, place your empty bowl in the wash bucket, and stumble towards the dark, crowded dormitory, your body already craving the oblivion of sleep. In your old life, back in the cottage that now feels a world away, time was a fluid, natural thing. It was measured by the quality of the light, the soft gray of dawn, the bright yellow of midday, the long, orange shadows of late afternoon. It was marked by the familiar sounds of the village, the church bell ringing for service, the lowing of cattle in the evening, the chatter of birds settling in for the night. Your body knew the rhythms of the day and the seasons. Here, in the factory, time is a tyrant. It is no longer a river, it is a cage. Your life is ruled by an invention that you had never paid much attention to before the clock. There is a large, imposing clock face on the wall of the spinning room, its black hands moving with a relentless, mechanical certainty. It is the true master of the factory. It tells you when to start, when you can in theory eat, and when to stop. It is deaf to your exhaustion, blind to your pain. The day is divided into brutal, unyielding blocks. The first bell rings for waking, the second for the start of the shift. The workday itself is a vast, seemingly endless ocean of minutes and hours. You try not to look at the clock. Watching it only makes time seem to slow down. Each tick of the second hand a tiny, knocking hammer blow. But you can't help it. Your eyes are drawn to it, trying to calculate how much of the day is gone, how much more you have to endure. The factory owners were obsessed with time. It was, quite literally, money. Every second a machine was idle was a second of lost profit. This obsession led to some notoriously cruel practices. One of the most infamous was the manipulation of the factory clock. It was not uncommon for overseers to be ordered to move the clock's hands back by 15 or 20 minutes near the end of the day, stealing that much more labor from the exhausted workers who had been desperately watching and waiting for the release of the final bell. Conversely, if workers were even a minute or two late in the morning, the gates would be locked, and they would lose a half day's or even a full day's pay, a devastating penalty. This strict new discipline of industrial time was a profound shock to a workforce that was largely first-generation rural migrants. They were used to a task-oriented approach to work. You shear the sheep until the sheep are shorn. You harvest the field until the crop is in. The task dictates the time. In the factory, time dictates the task. You work not until the job is done. It is never done, but until the clocks is you can stop. Historians refer to this as the shift from task orientation to time discipline, and it is one of the most fundamental psychological changes of the Industrial Revolution. It's a way of thinking that we now take for granted, that for you, it is a new and brutal form of enslavement. A particularly bizarre untelling detail from this era is the existence of time thieves. Some workers, in a desperate act of rebellion, would try to sabotage the factory clock. They might use a magnet to try and interfere with the mechanism, or find subtle ways to jam the gears. Such acts were considered among the most serious forms of industrial sabotage and would be met with instant dismissal and blacklisting, ensuring they would never find work in another mill again. It shows how the clock was seen not just as a tool, but as a symbol of the owner's absolute power. The academic debate on this topic is fascinating. Some historians argue that the imposition of clock time was a necessary evil, an essential part of the modernization process that led to increased efficiency and, eventually, a higher standard of living for society as a whole. Others argue that it was a deeply dehumanizing process, alienating workers from their labor and their own natural bodily rhythms, creating a new kind of poverty, a poverty of time. For you, standing at your station, the academic view is irrelevant. You just feel the oppression of the clock in your aching bones. The day is no longer a journey with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It is a sentence to be served. You break it down in your head into smaller, more manageable pieces. Just get to the halfway point. Just get through one more hour. Just make it to the next tick of that long black hand. The worst part of the day is the middle of the afternoon. The initial adrenaline of the morning has worn off, and the end of the shift is still a distant, unreachable shore. Your body is screaming for rest. Your mind is numb. But the clock on the wall shows that hours of work still stretch before you. It is at this point that you feel the full weight of time's tyranny. You are a prisoner, and the clock is your warden. Its steady, unfeeling tick, the sound of your life being measured out, not in moments of joy or rest, but in units of production. You stop thinking of days of the week. There is only work day in the theoretical, often non-existent, rest day. Time has become your enemy. You are constantly surrounded by a gentle, silent blizzard. It's not cold like snow. It's a storm of tiny white fibers. The flyer fluff from the raw cotton, and it is inescapable. It fills the air, catching in the beams of gaslight like a shimmering haze. It settles on everything, coating the machinery, the floors, and you, in a fine, downy layer of white. At first, it seems like a minor annoyance. You brush it from your face. You blink it out of your eyes. You feel it clinging to your hair and your threadbare clothes. When you cough, which is often, you can taste its dry, dusty texture in the back of your throat. But after days and weeks in the mill, you begin to understand that this soft, white snow is a more insidious and patient killer than any machine or overseer. The air in the spinning room is deliberately kept hot and humid. The moisture helps to prevent the delicate cotton threads from snapping. But this warm, damp atmosphere is the perfect medium for the cotton dust to hang suspended in the air, making it impossible not to breathe it in. Hour after hour, day after day, you see the effects on the older children and the adult workers. They all have a persistent, hacking cough known as the mill cough. It's a dry, rattling sound that echoes through the dormitories at night. They are often short of breath, their chests tight. They are suffering from biassi, a lung disease specifically caused by the inhalation of cotton dust. At the time, it was vaguely referred to as milk fever or brown lung, and it was simply accepted as a part of the job. The progression of the disease was cruelly deceptive. Workers would often feel the worst on a Monday. After a day or two away from the dust, if they were lucky enough to get a Sunday off, their chests would feel tightened, they would be breathless. As the week went on, the symptoms would seem to ease, a phenomenon doctors later called Monday fever. Workers thought they were simply getting used to it again. In reality, their lungs were becoming progressively more scarred and less able to function. After years of exposure, this leads to irreversible, disabling, and often fatal respiratory failure. You start to feel the beginnings of it yourself. You wake up with a tightness in your chest. You find yourself short of breath after just walking across the factory yard. You have a cough that won't go away, a constant companion to your aching muscles under fingertips. A particularly grim and little-known detail about this problem was the solution some mill owners implemented. Instead of improving ventilation, which was expensive and considered inefficient, they would sometimes provide workers with cheap, foul-tasting concoctions of oil or lard to swallow, under the mistaken belief that this would coat their lungs and protect them from the dust. These remedies were, of course, completely useless and often made the workers sick in other ways. The scientific and medical understanding of occupational diseases was in its infancy. For a long time, there was a fierce debate fueled by the factory owners about the cause of these respiratory problems. Owners would argue that the ill health of their workers was not due to the factory conditions, but to their poor, unsanitary lifestyles, their diet, or their supposed penchant for drinking. They claimed the fly was harmless, little more than a nuisance. It took decades of campaigning by doctors and social reformers, armed with mounting evidence on autopsy reports, to definitively link the cotton dust to the disease that was killing so many. This historical debate over the cause of biassi is a classic example of industry attempting to obscure scientific fact for financial reasons. You see the end stage of the disease in the faces of the oldest workers. You see men and women in their 30s and 40s who look ancient, their faces thin and drawn, their bodies stooped. They struggle to breathe even when standing still. They are the graduates of this system, their bodies used up and broken by the time they reach middle age. Many are eventually let go when they can no longer keep up with the pace of the machines, left to face poverty and a slow, suffocating death. Looking around the room, you see the white dust clinging to the eyelashes of the girl working next to you. You see it settled in the creases of the overseer's coat. It is the one truly democratic element in the factory. It touches everyone, but it only destroys the powerless. You take a breath, and you can feel the gritty fibers entering your lungs. The air itself, the most basic element of life, has been turned into a poison. The silent, ceaseless snowfall of the cotton mill is burying you, one tiny fiber at a time. You quickly learn that your labor is not the only thing of value to the factory owner. Your mistakes are profitable, too. Tacked to a wall near the overseer's small desk is a sheet of paper, densely covered in spittery handwriting. This is the list of rules and the corresponding fines. It is a complex and ever-changing document that governs every aspect of your behavior, and its sole purpose seems to be to ensure that the meager wage you are supposedly earning never actually reaches your pocket. The system is designed for you to fail. There are fines for being late, as you already know. There is a fine for talking to another worker. There is a fine for leaving your station without permission, even to get a drink of water. There is a fine for being caught with dirty hands or a dirty face. There is a fine for whistling. There is a fine for dropping a tool. There is even a fine, in some mills, for looking out of a window. The fines for work-related errors are the most common. If you piece a thread imperfectly, creating a lump in the yarn, you are fined. If you let a bobbin overfill and waste thread, you are fined. If a small drop of oil from your fingers gets onto the finished cotton, you are fined. These deductions are not small amounts. A single fine could wipe out a significant portion of a day's earnings. The overseer is the judge, jury, and executioner. He is the one who decides if an infraction has occurred, and he notes it down in his ledger next to your name. There is no appeal. His word is law. You see him levy a fine against a boy who sneezed too loudly, claiming it was a disturbance. The injustice is blatant, but you are all powerless. This system of fining was a cornerstone of factory discipline. It was more insidious than a beating. A beating was painful, but temporary. A fine was a direct blow to your already desperate economic situation. For the parish apprentices, like you, who saw no actual cash, the fines were logged as debts against your name, ensuring you remained bonded to the factory for even longer, supposedly working off your infractions. For the free children who worked alongside you, those who lived with their families and worked paid a small wage, the fines meant they would bring home even less money, pushing their families deeper into poverty. One of the most outrageously petty and well-documented types of fines was for using the privy. Workers were often given a limited number of privy tickets per week, or were allowed only a few minutes away from their machine. If they took too long, or had to go without a ticket, they would be heavily fined. This led to miserable and unsanitary situations, as workers would try to hold it in 4 hours, often leading to accidents and illness. The historical debate around this practice is less about its existence, which is well documented, and more about its justification. Factory owners argued that fines were a necessary tool for maintaining quality control and discipline in a largely unskilled and unruly workforce. They framed it as a more enlightened form of punishment than corporal punishment. Critics, however, saw it for what it was: a systematic method of wage theft, a way to claw back labor costs and increase profits under the guise of maintaining order. Many parliamentary reports contain pages upon pages of these fine lists, presented as evidence of the exploitative nature of the system. One afternoon, you are overcome by a fit of coughing, a result of the ever-present cotton dust. You have to step away from your machine for a moment to catch your breath. Leaning against a nearby wall, the overseer sees you. He doesn't say a word. He just walks over to his desk and makes a mark in his book. You know you've just been fined for idleness. The injustice of it stings more than any strap. You were not resting, you were struggling to breathe the very air the factory forced upon you. The punishments and the fines work together in a cruel harmony. A child who is tired and slow is more likely to make a mistake. The mistake earns them a punishment, perhaps a beating or the denial of a meal. The punishment makes them weaker and more tired, which in turn leads to more mistakes and more fines. It is a downward spiral, a cycle of punishment poverty designed to keep you trapped. You begin to feel a sense of hopelessness. It seems impossible to get through a single day without breaking one of the dozens of arbitrary rules. The list on the wall is not a guide to proper behavior. It is a menu of unavoidable debts. You are not just working for the factory, you are perpetually indebted to it. Your labor is not something you are paid for, it is something you owe. After weeks of relentless work, a rumor begins to circulate among the children in hushed whispers during the rare moments the overseer is out of earshot. It's payday. The concept is almost mythical to you. You've been working, and the overseer has been marking your fines, but the idea that this all translates into actual money is abstract and strange. For parish apprentices like yourself, there is no cash. Your earnings, minus the endless fines for talking or idleness, and deductions for your food and lodging, the straw mattress and grey gruel, are supposedly being held in trust for you until your apprenticeship ends. Years from now, most of you know, with a child's grim certainty, that you will never see a penny of it. But for the other children, the free laborers who live with their families in the surrounding tenements, payday is a real and desperate event. You watch them at the end of the week, lining up at the factory office, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. You feel a pang of something you can't quite name: envy, perhaps, or just a deep curiosity about this world of wages and money. Then you learn the truth about their payment, and the feeling of envy vanishes, replaced by a new understanding of the factory's layered cruelty. The children don't receive coins. Instead, they are paid in scrip or truck, a form of private money, paper vouchers or metal tokens that are printed by the factory owner. And this scrip can only be spent in one place, the factory store. This practice was known as the truck system. It was a brilliant, undoubtedly exploitative arrangement that allowed mill owners to control not only their workers' labor, but also their consumption. By paying in scrip, they ensured that the wages they paid out flowed directly back into their own pockets. Out of curiosity, you follow one of the older boys on his way to the company shop, or Tommy's shop, as it was grimly nicknamed. It's a small, dark storefront attached to the factory grounds. Inside, the shelves are sparsely stocked with basic necessities: loaves of bread, sacks of flour and oats, a few withered vegetables, candles, and soap. The boy you followed, whose name is Thomas, hands his scrip to the shopkeeper, who is often the factory manager's wife or relative. The prices are written on a calcboard, and even you, with no real concept of money, can sense that something is wrong. The prices are outrageously high, far higher than in the independent shops in the town center just a few streets away. A loaf of bread in the Tommy shop might cost twice what it would on the open market. The quality is also notoriously poor. The flour is often adulterated, the bacon rancid, but the workers have no choice. They are paid in scrip, so they must spend it here. They are trapped in a closed economic loop where the factory owner is both their employer and their only merchant. It's another layer of debt and dependence. If their wages for the week don't cover their family's needs, the shopkeeper will graciously offer them credit at an exorbitant interest rate. Of course, this ensures they start the next week already in debt, a debt that can only be paid off by more labor. A little known but fascinating aspect of the truck system was the variety of tokens used. Some were simple paper notes, but many factories minted their own unique metal coins, stamped with the owner's name or the mill's insignia. Numismatists and historians now collect these truck tokens as artifacts of this exploitative era. They are tangible relics of a private currency system that tethered workers to a single employer. The legality and morality of the truck system were, unsurprisingly, a subject of intense debate. Owners defended it as a convenience for their workers, providing easy access to goods without them having to travel into town. They even argued it was a moral benefit, as it prevented workers from squandering their cash wages on alcohol. Reformers, on the other hand, correctly identified it as a form of wage theft and a tool for creating debt peonage. A series of truck acts were passed by Parliament throughout the 19th century to try and outlaw the practice, but they were often filled with loopholes and poorly enforced, allowing the system to persist in many industrial areas for decades. You watch as Thomas leaves the shop with a small bag of oats and a single, sad-looking turnip. That is what his entire week of dangerous, exhausting labor has earned him. The hope you saw on his face earlier is gone, replaced by a familiar, dull resignation. You walk back to the apprentice house, the reality of the system crashing down on you. You realize that even for the free workers, freedom is an illusion. They are not selling their labor for a wage, they are exchanging it for overpriced food. The factory doesn't just own their time, it owns their survival. The intricate web of control is even more complete than you had imagined. The factory is not just a place of work, it is its own tiny, tyrannical kingdom with its own laws, its own police force, the overseers, and its own currency, and everyone inside is a subject, not a citizen. In the midst of the noise, the exhaustion, and the fear, you start to find moments of connection. They are not built on words. Talking is forbidden and dangerous, a finable offense that can raw the wrath of the overseer. Instead, you build friendships in the silent spaces between the clamor. It happens through a shared glance across the spinning room. You see a girl your age stumble from fatigue, and for a fleeting second, your eyes meet. In her expression, you see the same bone-deep weariness you feel in your own. You give her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She nods back. It's a silent acknowledgement. I see you. I know. This brief, secret exchange is a lifeline, a tiny spark of warmth in the cold, mechanical world. Friendships are forged in shared tasks. When you are moved to a new machine, an older boy shows you, with hand gestures and demonstration, the safest way to oil a gear without losing a finger. He doesn't speak, but his actions are a lesson in survival. Later, when he drops his small rag, you discreetly kick it back towards him before the overseer can notice. It's a small act of solidarity, a repaying of a silent debt. These alliances are fragile and constantly tested. The system is designed to pit you against each other. The piecework rates mean that the person working next to you is, in a sense, your competitor. The overseer's practice of rewarding informants means that anyone could be a spy. Trust is a dangerous currency, yet human connection persists in the darkest corners. The safest place for these fledgling friendships to grow is in the brief, stolen moments away from the factory floor. In the dormitory at night, after the matron has done her rounds and the only light is a sliver of moon through the grimy window, whispers are sometimes exchanged in the dark. You learn the names of the two boys who sleep on the same straw mattress as you. One is named Sam, HES from a fishing village, and he misses the smell of the sea. The other is Will, who is silent and coughs constantly. You don't talk about your old lives, that's too painful. Instead, you share practical information in hushed tones. Which overseer is in the fullest mood? Which machine has a loose belt? Where the matron hides the slightly less stale bread? It's a language of survival. A particularly poignant, and often unrecorded, aspect of these relationships was the creation of factory families. Children who had been sent to the mills alone, separated from their own kin, would often form deep, surrogate sibling bonds. An older, more experienced child might adopt a newcomer, teaching them the ropes, protecting them from bullies, and sharing their meager rations. These were not officially sanctioned or recognized relationships, but for the children involved, they were a vital source of emotional support and protection in a world devoid of either. The historical evidence for these friendships is, by its nature, scarce. The children were largely illiterate and left no diaries. Official factory records logged them as numbers, not as people with complex social lives. Our understanding comes primarily from anecdotal evidence in parliamentary commission reports, where former child laborers, speaking as adults, would recall these small acts of kindness. Historians still debate the prevalence and strength of these bonds. Were they the norm? A testament to human resilience, or were they rare exceptions in a system that effectively crushed the capacity for empathy and cooperation? One evening, in the common room, you see the matron confiscate a small, carved bird from a new girl who has just arrived. The girl is trying hard not to cry. Later that night, in the dark of the dormitory, you see another, older girl creep over to the newcomer's mattress. She presses something into the new girl's hand. You can't see what it is, but you see the new girl clutch it to her chest. It's a secret gift, a silent message of welcome and empathy. These moments become your anchor. They are proof that the factory has not yet succeeded in turning you all into unthinking parts of the machinery. The camaraderie is not one of joy or shared laughter. That's something deeper and more primal. It's the fellowship of the besieged, the quiet understanding that passes between fellow survivors. It doesn't make the work any less painful or the days any shorter, but it makes the crushing loneliness just a little more bearable. In a world that tries to isolate you, every shared glance, every whispered warning, every small act of secret kindness is an act of rebellion. It is you, and the children around you, quietly insisting on your own humanity. The word Sunday still exists in the factory, but its meaning has been hollowed out, leaving only an empty shell. Back in your village, Sunday was a day of profound difference. It was the day the church bell rang for a reason other than to mark the hour. It was a day of rest, of cleaner clothes, of a slightly better meal, of a pause in the endless rhythm of agricultural work. It was a day the community came together. Here, Sunday is, at best, a slight variation on the relentless grind. For the first few weeks, you work straight through, 7 days a week. The machines never stop, so why should you? But then, an order comes down from the owner, often prompted by pressure from local church groups or early reformers, that the apprentices must be given some semblance of a day of rest and religious instruction. So on Sunday morning, you are not woken by the knocker up. You get to sleep in for an extra hour. The luxury of it feels strange, disorienting. The brief, extra sleep only serves to make you more aware of your own exhaustion. But the day is not yours. The morning is dedicated to cleaning. Not cleaning yourselves or the squalid dormitory, but cleaning the machinery. The factory is silent for the first time all week, and the quiet is eerie, almost unnatural. Under the close supervision of the overseer, you and the other children are tasked with the deep cleaning of the machines you have been tending all week. You scrub grease from gears, take cake cotton fluff from intricate parts, and polish the iron frames. It's hard, dirty work, and in some ways, it is even more dangerous than operating the machines. To reach hidden parts, you have to climb on the frames, contorting your body into awkward positions. A slip could mean a bad fall onto the hard floor, but the overseer insists the machines must be spotless for the week ahead. It's a chilling reminder of the factory's priorities. The health and maintenance of the iron is more important than the health of the children who operate it. A little-known aspect of this Sunday cleaning was that it was often unpaid. The owners argued that since the children were not being productive not creating yarn, this work was part of their upkeep or training and did not warrant a wage. It was, in effect, another form of stolen labor. After a few hours of this, you are given a piece of dark bread and herded into a large, cold room that serves as a makeshift chapel or classroom. A local clergyman, or sometimes the factory owner himself, if he is particularly pious or keen to project a benevolent image, will deliver a long, monotonous sermon. The sermon is never about hope or salvation in the next life. It is about the virtues of obedience, diligence, and subservience in this one. You are told that your hard work is pleasing to God. You are told that your poverty is a test of your faith. You are told that to be a good Christian is to be a good, uncomplaining worker. The religious instruction is just another tool of factory discipline, using divine authority to reinforce the owner's earthly power. You sit on a hard wooden bench, your stomach rumbling, your body aching from the morning's cleaning. You try to listen, that the words wash over you. All around you, children are fighting to stay awake, their heads lolling, their bodies slumping. The overseer patrols the aisles, his strop at the ready, to wrap the shoulders of anyone who dares to nod off during the sermon. Historians still debate the motives behind this mandatory Sunday instruction. Was it a genuine, if misguided, attempt by some owners to provide a moral and spiritual education for their otherwise neglected charges, or was it a cynical performance, a way to placate social critics and create a more docile, manageable workforce by framing their exploitation as a religious duty? The content of the surviving sermons and lesson plans from this era suggests that, for many, the latter was a primary motivation. The afternoon is supposed to be free time, but what is there to do are not allowed to leave the factory grounds. The gate is locked. There are no toys, no books, no space to run or play. Free time usually consists of sitting in the bleak, muddy yard if the weather is fair, or huddling in the cold dormitory if it is raining. Most of you use the time to do the work the factory doesn't provide for. You try to mend the rips in your tattered clothes with a borrowed needle and thread, or you simply lie on your straw mattress, falling into a state of semi-conscious stupor, trying to gather the strength for the week to come. This is your Sunday. It's not a day of rest, it's a day of different work. It's not a day of spiritual comfort, it's a day of ideological reinforcement. It's not a day of freedom, it's just a different kind of confinement. As the sun begins to set on this hollow imitation of a holy day, a familiar sense of dread begins to creep in. The eerie quiet will soon be over. The monster will reawaken. And tomorrow, the knocker-up will come again. The rhythm of the factory is so monotonous, so unvarying, that you almost become numb to the danger. The constant threat of the moving machinery becomes a part of the background noise of your life. You learn the dance. You learn the timing. You become complacent. And that's when it happens. It happens without warning. A piercing scream cuts through the relentless roar of the spinning room, a sound so full of human terror that it momentarily silences everything else. Everyone freezes. He'd snap up. The overseer, who was at the far end of the room, starts running. You see a small crowd of children gathering around one of the carding machines, the machines that comb the rock, cotton fibers before they are spun. You push your way closer, a knot of ice forming in your stomach. On the floor is a girl named Mary. You don't know her well, but you've exchanged those silent nods of acknowledgement before. She was a scavenger on the carting engines, a job that required her to clean the dangerous, toothed trollers. Her hand is a mangled, unrecognizable mess. Her long hair, which had come untied, got caught in one of the machine's fast-moving belts. It pulled her in. Her scalp is bleeding profusely, and her arm is twisted at an unnatural angle. She is not screaming anymore. She is moaning. Hello. Continuous sound of pure agony. The factory floor is not a place for compassion. It is a place for efficiency. The overseer's first priority is not the injured girl. It is the machine. He barks at another worker to shut it down, to untangle the hair and bloody mess from the belt. Lost time is lost money. Then, and only then, does he turn his attention to Mary. There is no doctor, no infirmary. The overseer and another man lift her, her limp body a dead weight, and carry her out of the room. They take her to the apprentice house and lay her on her straw mattress. The matron comes with a bucket of water and some rags. That is the extent of the medical care. The other children are quickly shooed back to their stations. Get back to work. Nothing to see here. The overseer shouts, his voice sharp with annoyance. The machine is restarted. The noise swells to fill the room once more, swallowing the memory of the scream. Within minutes, it is as if nothing has happened, but something has changed. The background threat has become a foreground reality. The machine is not just a tool, it is a predator, and it has just fed. Accidents like this were horrifically common. The machinery was completely unguarded. There were no safety shields, no emergency shut-off switches. Belts, gears, and rollers were all exposed. Children, tired from long hours, were particularly vulnerable. Fingers and hands were crushed in rollers. Limbs were caught and mangled by belts. Scalping incidents, like Mary's, were a frequent and horrific injury for girls whose long hair got caught. The records of early hospitals in industrial towns are filled with grim accounts of these factory accidents. A strange and chilling detail of the time was the concept of workers' compensation, or rather, the complete lack of it. If a worker was injured, no matter how severely, they were not entitled to any payment or medical care from the owner. In fact, if the injury prevented them from working, they were simply dismissed. They became a burden on their family or the parish. In some very rare and highly publicized cases, a particularly benevolent owner might give a small one-time payment to an injured child, more as a public relations move than an admission of responsibility. The historical debate around factory safety is a stark one. Owners consistently fought against government regulation to fence or guard machinery, arguing it was too expensive, that it would impede the efficiency of the machines, and that accidents were not the fault of the machines, but the carelessness of the workers. It took decades of struggle, lobbying by reformers, and shocking parliamentary reports filled with testimony from maimed children before the first, very basic, factory acts mandating simple safety measures were passed. You see Mary later that night in the dormitory. She is pale and shivering, her head crudely bandaged. She will not be returning to the factory floor. With only one good hand, she is no longer useful. In a few days, after she is stable enough to travel, she will likely be sent back to her home parish, which will now have the burden of caring for a disabled child. She is a piece of broken machinery, being discarded. You lie on your mattress in the dark. The image of her injury burned into your mind. The factory, you realize, doesn't just consume your time and your energy. It consumes your body. It uses you up, and if it breaks you, it simply throws you away and replaces you with a new, unbroken part. The fear you feel is cold and sharp. You now understand that your own survival is not guaranteed. It is a matter of luck. A daily gamble you take every time you step onto the factory floor. The chill of the factory yard seems to seep into your bones and stay there. One morning, you wake up and the familiar aches are different. It's not just the soreness of overworked muscles. The deep, penetrating cold has settled in your chest, and your head is pounding with a dull, heavy rhythm that matches the throb of the distant engines. When you try to stand, the dormitory room sways. You are sick. Panic, cold and sharp, cuts through the fog of fever. In this world, sickness is not an inconvenience, it is a catastrophe. There is no sick leave, no concept of a day off to recover. If you cannot work, you are useless. And if you are useless, you are disposable. You force yourself to your feet, your legs trembling. You swallow the tasteless oat gruel, though it feels like swallowing sand. Every part of you screams for rest, for the simple comfort of lying down in the straw. But you know you cannot give in. You have to get to the factory. You have to work. You join the ragged line of children marching to the morning shift. Every step is an effort. The cold morning air burns your lungs. When you enter the spinning room, the wall of hot, humid, dust-filled air makes you dizzy, and the roar of the machinery is a physical assault on your throbbing head. You take your place at the machine, your hands moving automatically to piece the broken threads. But your fingers are clumsy, your vision is blurred, and your movements are slow. You can feel the overseer's eyes on you. Sickness is weakness, and weakness is a provocation. You see it happen to another boy. Will, the one who sleeps on your mattress and coughs through the night. He has been getting thinner and paler for weeks. Today, he collapses at his machine, his body finally giving out. The overseer doesn't rush to help him. He nudges him with his boot. "Get up," he says, his voice flat. Well, doesn't move. The overseer sighs, an expression of pure annoyance on his face. He calls over two of the bigger men. Then they carry Will out, just as they carried Mary, the injured girl. You know you won't see Will again. He will be taken to the sick room, a small, isolated chamber in the apprentice house where the hopelessly ill are left to either recover on their own or die. Out of sight, out of mind. If he dies, his name will be struck from the ledger, and his parish will be notified that their apprentice is no longer a cost to the factory. The fear gives you a temporary surge of adrenaline. You force your body to obey, your hands to move faster. You try to look busy, to look healthy. You cannot let them see you falter. The prevalence of disease in the factories and apprentice houses was staggering. The combination of malnutrition, exhaustion, poor sanitation, and crowded living conditions created a perfect breeding ground for illness. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, milk fever, cholera, and typhus swept through the workforce. The mortality rate for factory children was shockingly high compared to children in other professions. A particularly grim and little-known detail is what happened to the bodies of the children who died. Funerals were expensive and time-consuming. Some unscrupulous mill owners, to avoid the cost and the potential for official inquiry, would dispose of the bodies secretly. There are accounts, oft unwhispered and hard to prove, of small bodies being buried in unmarked graves on factory grounds at night. or even weighted and dropped into the nearby rivers or canals that powered the mills. Their existence was erased as efficiently as their names were struck from the books. The historical debate on this issue centers on the concept of neglect. Were the high death rates a result of deliberate, callous disregard for human life in the pursuit of profit, or were they an unavoidable consequence of the rapid, unplanned urbanization of the time, where medical knowledge was limited and the understanding of public health was in its infancy, while the broader societal factors certainly played a role? The evidence from reformers' report strongly suggests that the specific conditions within the factories, the long hours, the poor food, the lack of basic care were directly responsible for the elevated mortality rates, a fact that owners actively tried to deny. You make it through the day. Every hour is a battle against your own body. Your fever rages, and you move in a haze of pain and confusion. When the final bell rings, you stumble back to the dormitory and collapse onto the straw, your body shivering uncontrollably despite the stuffy air. You don't eat. You can't. You just lie there, listening to the coughing and moaning of the other children around you. You think of Will, alone in the sick room. You are terrified that you will be next. You are not afraid of dying in the same way you were afraid of the spinning mule on your first day. This is a different fear. It's a fear of being erased, of disappearing without a trace. Your short, miserable life signifying nothing at all. You close your eyes and pray, not to God, but to your own body, begging it to hold on for one more day. Your fever breaks after a few days of sheer, desperate willpower. You survive, but you are left with a new awareness of your own body, a constant inventory of aches and pains that never truly go away. The factory is not just breaking you in spirit, it is physically deforming you. You look at your own hands. The fingertips are permanently calloused and tough from piecing threads. The nails are broken and grimy. There is a small, puckered scar on your knuckle where you grazed a moving gear. These hands no longer look like a child's hands. They look like miniature versions of an old man's hands, worn and tired. The real damage, however, is deeper, in your bones and muscles. You stand for more than 14 hours a day, leaning over the same machine, performing the same repetitive motions. This unnatural posture, held for so long while your body is still growing, begins to have predictable and devastating effects. You feel a constant, dull ache in your lower back. Your neck is perpetually stiff, but the most noticeable change is in your legs. The long hours of standing on hard floors, with little nutrition to support bone growth, cause your legs to ache with a deep, throbbing pain, especially at night. You see it in the older children. Their legs are beginning to bow outwards, or are bent at the knees, a condition known as knock knees. These skeletal deformities were a hallmark of child laborers. Their bodies were literally being bent into the shape of their work. You also notice your shoulders are becoming uneven. The repetitive motion of reaching with your dominant arm to piece threads is making the muscles on one side of your body overdevelop, while the other side remains weaker. You are becoming asymmetrical, lopsided, molded by the machine you serve. These physical deformities were so common that they became a key focus for reformers. Doctors like Charles Turner T. Hacker and Peter Gaskell wrote groundbreaking and controversial books in the 1830s, meticulously documenting the specific physical ailments associated with different types of factory work. They were among the first to practice what we would now call occupational medicine. Their clinical descriptions of factory cripples were powerful weapons in the fight for reform. A particularly cruel and obscure consequence of this labor was its effect on height. The children in the factories were, on average, significantly shorter than their counterparts in the countryside. The combination of malnutrition, lack of sunlight, and the sheer physical stress of the work stunted their growth. To a factory owner, a smaller child was often more useful, able to fit into tighter spaces. The system, in a grim irony, was creating a workforce perfectly and tragically adapted to its own needs. The academic debate here is subtle but important. For a long time, the narrative was that these deformities were a universal experience for all factory children. More recent historical research, however, has shown a more nuanced picture. The severity of the physical damage often depended on the specific type of work, the age at which a child started, the policies of a particular mill, and even the child's baseline health. Some owners, particularly those who were more public-facing or had a religious motivation, did make some rudimentary efforts to mitigate the worst effects, perhaps by allowing slightly shorter hours or providing seating a rare luxury. This doesn't excuse the system, but it shows that the experience was not uniform. It was a spectrum of exploitation. You try to counteract the damage in small, secret ways. You try to consciously stand up straight when the overseer isn't looking. You stretch your aching back when you think no one can see. You try to use your non-dominant hand for small tasks to balance the strain, but these are tiny, futile gestures against the overwhelming force of the daily routine. The most frightening part is how normal it all becomes. You see the bowed legs and stooped shoulders of the older workers, and you no longer see it as a deformity. You see it as the future. It is the shape of a survivor. You are so immersed in this world that the signs of physical ruin become markers of experience. You lie in the dormitory at night, and you can feel the factory's mark on you. It's in the permanent ache in your spine, the tightness in your chest, the way your legs throb. The factory isn't just a place you go to work. It's a mold, and it is pressing you, squeezing you, and reshaping you into something that will bear its impression for the rest of your life. The pain is no longer a temporary symptom of a hard day's work. It has become a permanent part of who you are. Years pass. The seasons change outside the grimy factory windows. But inside, the rhythm of the machine remains the same. You are no longer a new arrival, terrified and bewildered. You are a veteran. You know the sounds, the smells, and the unwritten rules of survival. You've grown, not just in age, but into the shape of your work. You are taller now, your limbs longer, your face leaner, and with the passing of time, a new sound begins to filter into the factory. A sound as persistent and quiet as the whispers in the dormitory, the sound of rumor. It doesn't come from the children. It comes from the adults, the spinners and weavers who work alongside you. You catch snippets of their hushed, anxious conversations during the rare moments when the overseer is absent. They speak of men with strange titles, commissioners and inspectors. They talk about Parliament in London, a place as mythical to you as the moon. And they whisper one word over and over again: reform. The idea is hard to grasp. The factory, in its current state, feels as permanent and unchangeable as the sky. The idea that someone, somewhere, could change the rules, could shorten the hours, could forbid the strapping, could say that children under a certain age should not work, it all seems like a fantastical dream. The rumors are fueled by scraps of news from the world outside. A literate worker might get hold of a radical newspaper, like the Poor Man's Guardian, and read passages aloud in a hushed corner of a pub. These stories trickle down to the factory floor. You hear tales of great meetings in cities like Manchester and Leeds, where thousands of workers gathered to demand change. You hear the names of men who are fighting for you, men you will never meet. Richard Dostel ER, who wrote fiery letters to the newspapers comparing the life of a factory child to that of a slave. Michael Sadler, a member of Parliament who was heading a committee to investigate the conditions. These early reform movements were a patchwork of different groups. There were the 10-hour movements, driven by the workers themselves, who argued for a law limiting the workday to 10 hours. There were humanitarian reformers, often from the middle and upper classes, who were driven by moral and religious outrage at the cruelty they saw. And there were even some factory owners, like the aforementioned John Fielden, who supported reform, partly out of conscience and partly for a very practical reason. They believed that a shorter workday would ultimately create a healthier, more efficient, and more stable workforce. A little-known aspect of this period was the war of pamphlets. Both sides, the reformers and the factory owners, waged a massive propaganda campaign, Reformers published pamphlets with shocking testimonies from child laborers and stark illustrations of factory cripples. In response, the factory owners' associations published their own pamphlets, full of statistics proving the economic necessity of child labor and featuring glowing, sanitized descriptions of factory life, often claiming the children were happy, healthy, and grateful for the opportunity to work. The academic debate continues to this day over the true motivations of the reformers. Were they purely benevolent humanitarians, as the traditional narrative suggests, or were some of them driven by other motives? Some historians argue that a part of the reform movement was fueled by a Tory backlash against the new class of fabulously wealthy and often politically liberal mill owners. By exposing the horrors of the factories, these conservative, landowning elites could score political points against their rivals. The truth is likely a complex mix of genuine compassion, political maneuvering, and economic self-interest. For you, the political intricacies are meaningless. What matters is the flicker of hope the rumors ignite. It's a dangerous, fragile thing. You see the overseer break up a group of whispering men with a new kind of fury. The owners are scared. The idea of government interference in their factories, which they view as their private property, is a profound threat to their power and their profits. Talking about reform becomes an act of sedition. One day, you see something that makes the rumors feel real. A well-dressed man, a stranger, is given a tour of the factory by the owner himself. The man is not a buyer or an investor. He carries a notebook and asks questions. The overseer, usually so menacing, is suddenly polite, almost servile. He doesn't strap a single child while the stranger is watching. The pace of the machine seems to slow down just a little. The visit is brief, but it leaves a lasting impression. The world outside has noticed you. You are no longer invisible. The whispers in the dark, the secret newspapers, the far-off committees, they are real. For the first time since you walked through those iron gates, you allow yourself to imagine a different life. A life where the day does not last for 14 hours. A life where Sunday is truly a day of rest. A life where the clock is not a tyrant. The hope is faint and terrifying, but it is there. It hangs in the dusty air, as real and as tangible as the cotton fluff itself. The rumors of reform solidify into a concrete event. A notice is posted. A factory inspector will be visiting next week. The news sends a ripple of something new through the factory, not fear, but a strange, theatrical panic. The week leading up to the visit is a flurry of orchestrated activity. Suddenly, the factory is being cleaned with a vigor you've never seen before. The Sunday cleaning becomes a daily activity. Grimy windows are washed, allowing unfamiliar streams of natural light to pierce the gloom. The floors are scrubbed of their years-long accumulation of oil and filth. Even the privy is whitewashed. The owner is not fixing the problems, he is hiding them. The overseer's behavior undergoes a miraculous transformation. The leather strap disappears from his belt. He walks the floor with a strained, artificial smile on his face. He speaks to the children in a tone that is unnervingly gentle. He pats a boy on the head for good work. A gesture so out of character it is more frightening than his usual scowl. You and the other children are given instructions. You are to be on your best behavior. You are to work diligently. If the inspector speaks to you, you are to say that you are happy here. You are to say that you are well fed and well cared for. You are to say that the overseer is a kind man. An older boy, known for being defiant, is sent away for the week, transferred to a night shift at another of the owner's mills. The cast is being carefully selected for this performance. On the day of the visit, the factory feels like a different place. The air, while still thick, is noticeably clearer. The matron and the apprentice house even served porridge with a spoonful of molasses in it for breakfast. You are all wearing clothes that had been freshly, if crudely, washed. The inspector arrives, a stern-looking man in a dark suit, accompanied by the fawning factory owner. He walks through the spinning room, his eyes taking everything in. He looks at the newly cleaned machines, the freshly washed floors. He sees children working quietly and efficiently. He sees an overseer who looks more like a benevolent schoolmaster than a brutal disciplinarian. He stops by your station. The owner and the overseer stand a few feet away, their eyes fixed on you. The inspector's gaze is serious, and for a moment, you feel he can see through the charade. "And what is your name, son?" he asks, his voice surprisingly soft. You tell him your name, your own voice barely a whisper. "How old are you?" You know the answer you are supposed to give. The overseer has coached the youngest-looking children to lie about their age, as the new proposed laws would restrict labor for those under 9. 12. "Sir, you lie, though you are only 10. Do you like your work here?" This is the crucial question. You can feel the weight of the owner's stare. You can feel the threat of the overseer's strap, which you know will return the moment the inspector leaves. You think about telling the truth. You think about Mary's mangled hand, about Will's racking cough, about the endless days and the meager food. But fear is a more powerful force than hope. You look down at your hands and mumble the rehearsed line, "Yes, sir, it's a fine place to work." "Sir." The inspector nods slowly, his expression unreadable, and moves on. You have played your part. These inspections were essential and deeply flawed component of the early factory acts. The first acts of 1833 established a professional inspectorate, a revolutionary concept at the time. However, there were only 4 inspectors appointed for the thousands of factories across the entire country. It was an impossible task. They could rarely make surprise visits, as word of their arrival would travel faster than they could. A little-known detail is the sheer level of deception the inspectors faced. Mill owners developed elaborate systems to cheat the laws. They would keep 2 sets of books, one with a rail, the legal hours on ages, and one to show the inspector. They had warning systems, like bells or signals, to hurry the youngest children out of sight into hiding places in wool baskets, up chimneys, or in the privies when an inspector was spotted. This practice was so common, it was given a name: the relay system. The historical debate around the effectiveness of the inspectorate is ongoing. Early on, they were largely powerless, more of a symbolic presence than a real threat. Owners would obstruct them, workers were too terrified to speak truthfully, and magistrates, who were often mill owners themselves or their friends, would impose laughably small fines for even the most blatant violations. However, the inspectors detailed, often horrified, reports back to Parliament were crucial. They provided a steady stream of official, undeniable evidence that the abuses were real and widespread, which fueled the demand for stronger, more enforceable laws in the decades to come. As the inspector leaves the factory, a collective sigh of relief seems to pass through the workforce. The performance is over. The very next day, the overseer's strap is back on his belt. The grime begins to reclaim the windows. The boy who was sent away reappears, his face bruised. The factory returns to its true self. The visit has changed nothing about your daily reality, but it has changed something inside you. You have been forced to lie, to participate in the deception. And the bitterness of that lie, the taste of your own fear, hardens something within you. The faint hope for a savior from outside begins to dim, replaced by a cold, quiet anger. Time continues its relentless march, marked not by calendars, but by your own growth. The factory, which once seemed a world of giants, now feels smaller. The machines you once had to strain to reach are now at a comfortable working height. The cramped space you scurried through as a scavenger is now a tight squeeze. You are no longer a small, nimble child. You are becoming a young adult, and in the brutal logic of the factory, this is not a promotion. It is a problem. Your value as a worker was intrinsically tied to your size. Your small, quick fingers were perfect for piecing threads. Your short stature was ideal for scavenging under the mules. But now, your fingers are larger, a little less deft. Your body, taller and broader, is more awkward in the tight spaces between machines. You are, quite simply, becoming too big For the jobs that were the exclusive domain of children, you start to notice a change in how the overseer treats you. He no longer sees you as a versatile, easily intimidated part. He sees you as less efficient. He watches you more closely, his expression critical. When a thread breaks, it takes you a fraction of a second longer to fix it than the new, smaller children who have arrived to take your old place. The factory is a system that consumes childhood, and yours is now mostly consumed. This transition from child laborer to adult worker was a perilous and uncertain time. There was no guaranteed promotion or career path. As you aged out of the specific child roles, you were thrown into a competitive pool with other young adults and older workers for the adult job spinner. Waiter, worker. These jobs required more skill and strength, but there were fewer of them. If you were lucky and had shown an aptitude, the overseer might take you on as an assistant spinner, a long, informal apprenticeship. If you were unlucky, or if there were no openings, you could find yourself unemployed. The factory that had taken your childhood and bent your body now had no further use for you. It was a cruel irony after years of sacrificing your health and youth to the mill. You could be cast out precisely because you had survived and grown up. A particularly bleak, and rarely discussed, aspect of this was the fate of the apprentice house children. As they reached the end of their apprenticeship, usually around age 18 or 21, they were officially free. But freedom was a terrifying prospect. They had no family nearby, no home to return to, and no skills other than the specific, repetitive tasks of the mill. They had no money, as their wages had been consumed by the cost of their own miserable upkeep. They were adults, but with the life experience and resources of a lost child. Many simply signed on as low-wage adult workers at the same mill, exchanging one form of bondage for another. The academic question here is whether the factory system created a permanent, dependent laboring class. Did this transition from child to adult worker offer a path to upward mobility, however slight, or did it simply lock individuals and their families into a generational cycle of factory work, with little hope of escape for the vast majority? The evidence points towards the latter. The skills learned in the factory were not broadly transferable, and the physical toll of the labor often left them unable to do other kinds of work by the time they reached middle age. You feel this uncertainty every day. You watch the new children, the ones who are 7 or 8 years old, scurrying under the machines just as you once did. You see in them a reflection of your past, and you realize you are now part of the factory's past tense. The overseer moves you from your familiar piecing station to a heavier, more demanding task hauling baskets of raw cotton to the carding engines. The work requires more brute strength than less dexterity. It's a sign you are no longer a nimble-fingered youth. You are now just another source of muscle. The pay, if you were to see it, is barely any different. You are growing up, a process that should be full of possibility and hope. But here, in the shadow of the factory, it is a process fraught with anxiety. You are becoming too big for the world that has been your entire reality for as long as you can remember. The factory has a voracious appetite for the young. It is less interested in those who manage to grow old. You have survived the hazards of the machinery and the brutality of the system, only to face a new threat, the threat of your own obsolescence. The factory is a self-contained world. The high brick walls and the massive iron gate are not just there to keep people out, they are there to keep you in. Your entire existence is confined to the factory yard, the roaring spinning room, and the squalid apprentice house. The world outside is a distant, muffled rumor, but on rare occasions, you catch a glimpse of it. Sometimes, the main gate is left open for a few moments to allow a large wagon to enter or leave. In that brief window, you can see a slice of the street beyond. You see people who are not covered in cotton dust, wearing clothes that are not rags. You see a woman carrying a basket of fresh bread, its smell a phantom on the wind. You see 2 men laughing together, their faces animated and free. You see a horse-drawn omnibus clatter by, carrying people to unknown destinations. These glimpses are like postcards from another planet. Your new job of hauling cotton sometimes takes you to a corner of the yard you've never been to before. Near a section of the wall where a few bricks have crumbled away, if you stand at just the right angle, you can peer through the small gap. It offers a limited, framed view of a narrow back alley. It's not a beautiful view. It's a grimy, cobbled lane between two towering tenements. But it's a view of freedom. You watch as a dog chases a cat. You see a woman lean out of a high window to shake a rock. The dust motes dancing in a sunbeam. You see children who are not working in the factory, playing a game with a bouncing ball. Their shouts of laughter sound so alien it makes your heart ache. They are poor. Their clothes are worn, but they are playing. They own their own time, at least for this small part of the day. You begin to visit your secret peephole whenever you have a spare moment and the overseer isn't looking. It becomes your private ritual, your silent escape. You watch the small dramas of the alley unfold. You see a family moving in, carrying their meager possessions. You see a young couple arguing and then making up. You see an old man sitting on his doorstep, smoking a pipe and watching the world go by. These stolen moments of observation begin to stir something within your imagination. You start to wonder about the lives of these people. Where does the man with the pipe go when he gets up? What are the children playing in the street, learning in school? What did the couple fight about their world? However poor and difficult, seems rich with a complexity that your own life lacks. Your life is a straight line of repetitive action. Theirs is full of choices and possibilities. This sense of confinement and the yearning for the world outside is a recurring theme in the scant personal records we have from the period. While most child laborers were illiterate, some reformers recorded their conversations on testimonies. A common thread is a profound lack of knowledge about the world beyond the factory walls. Some children had never seen a field of grass since their infancy. Others didn't know the name of the town they were in, let alone the name of the monarch. Their world had shrunk to the size of the mill. An interesting and poignant detail that emerges from these accounts is the development of a kind of factory folklore. In the absence of real knowledge about the outside world, the children would create their own stories and myths. They would whisper tales about what lay beyond the walls, magical shops, hidden parks, or even monsters. It was a way of populating the vast, unknown territory of outside with their own imagination, a coping mechanism for their extreme isolation. The historical question here is about the psychological impact of this confinement. Did it, as some have argued, completely crush the children's spirit and curiosity, making them docile and accepting of their fate, or did the stark contrast between their imprisonment and the glimpses of freedom outside actually foster a deeper, more potent sense of injustice and a desire for another life? It's likely that both reactions occurred, varying from individual to individual. For every spirit that was broken, there was another in whom a quiet rebellion was slowly taking root. One afternoon, through your peephole, you see one of the children from the alley, a girl your age with bright red hair, look directly towards the factory wall. She can't see you, of course, but for a moment, it feels like she is looking right at you. She is free, and you are not. The injustice of it is a physical blow. It's no longer a vague concept, it's a stark, undeniable reality, framed by a crumbling hole in a brick wall. The glimpse of the outside world is both a comfort and a torture. It reminds you that another way of life exists. It fuels your daydreams, but it also sharpens the pain of your own captivity. You turn away from the peephole and pick up your basket of cotton. The weight feels heavier now. You are not just carrying cotton. You are carrying the knowledge of the life you are not living. The years have ground you down, but they haven't broken you. You have survived. You are now in your late teens, a young man by any measure. The last vestiges of childhood have been scoured away by the relentless pace of the factory. Your apprenticeship, the legal arrangement that bound you to this place since you were a small child, is nearing its end. You are about to be freed. This transition is not marked by a ceremony or a handshake. It is a quiet, administrative change. One day, the matron in the apprentice house informs you that your bed is needed for a new arrival. Your contract is up. You are no longer the factory's responsibility. You are to be paid a wage now. Like the other adult workers, you are on your own. Freedom, when it finally comes, tastes like panic. You have nowhere to go. The village you came from is a faint, dreamlike memory. Your family, you heard through a whispered rumor years ago, moved on, perhaps to another city or even across the ocean. You have no home, no money saved, and no one in the world to turn to. You do the only thing you can. You go to the overseer and ask to stay on as a paid hand. He looks you over, his expression one of complete indifference. He has seen this dozens of times. He agrees, quoting a wage that is barely enough to live on. You are no longer a parish apprentice. You are now a low-wage, free adult worker. The chains are no longer legal, they are economic. You find a room to rent. It's not a room, really, but a corner of a crowded, filthy attic in a tenement building, just a few streets from the factory. You share it with 3 other men who also work at the mill. Your bed is a pile of rags in the corner. It's a marginal improvement on the apprentice house, but only just. The rent consumes almost half of your meager wages. You are now a full-fledged factory proletarian. Your life is still governed by the factory clock, but with a few crucial, miserable differences. Now, you have to buy your own food. You quickly learn the grim arithmetic of survival, calculating whether you can afford a loaf of bread and a bit of cheese, or if it will just be watered-down gruel again. You are perpetually hungry, perpetually tired. You also have to buy your own clothes. The rags you wore as an apprentice finally fall apart, and you spend a week's wages on a pair of sturdy, but coarse trousers and a shirt from a second-hand market. For the first time, you understand the crushing weight of expenses, the constant anxiety of trying to make your small income stretch to cover the bare necessities of life. This journey from apprentice to wage laborer was the completion of a cycle that defined the Industrial Revolution. You have been fully transformed from a rural child with ties to the land into a member of the urban working class, entirely dependent on selling your labor for a wage. Your life is a perfect illustration of the great social and economic shift of the era. A lesser-known detail of this new freedom was the lack of any social safety net. As an apprentice, if you got sick, the factory had a miserable obligation to house you. As a wage worker, if you get sick and can't work, you don't get paid. If you can't pay your rent, you are thrown out onto the street. Your survival is entirely your own responsibility. This precariance has created a new, modern form of anxiety. Historians debate whether this transition represented any real improvement in a person's life. On one hand, you now have a degree of personal freedom. You can, in theory, quit your job. You can spend your wages as you see fit. You are no longer legally bonded. On the other hand, your freedom is severely constrained by economic necessity. Quitting your job without another one lined up means starvation. Your choice of how to spend your money is a choice between different kinds of deprivation. Was this wage slavery simply a different, more sophisticated form of the bonded servitude you experienced as a child? It's a question that lies at the heart of the critique of industrial capitalism. You fall into the routine of your new life. Wake in the dark attic. Walk the grimy streets to the factory. Work a 12 or 14-hour day, now on one of the heavier machines. A job that requires the strength you've gained with age. Walk back to the attic. Eat a meager meal. Sleep. Repeat. You see the new apprentices arriving at the factory. Small children, just as you were. Their faces a mixture of fear and confusion. You see the overseer hurting them, his manner as brutal as ever. You are watching the cycle begin all over again. You are no longer the victim of that specific system, but you are a part of the larger machine that perpetuates it. You are the after picture, the end result of the process they are just beginning. You are a ghost of their future, and in their terrified eyes, you see a ghost of your own past. The factory has released you from one form of bondage only to trap you in another. The walls are no longer brick and iron, they are made of hunger and rent. Decades pass. The city grows around you, its noise becoming the constant soundtrack of your life. The factory, once a cutting-edge marvel, is now just another aging, soot-stained building among many. You are no longer a young man. You are old. Not in years, you are perhaps in your early 40s, but in the way your body feels. In the deep lines etched on your face. In the permanent stoop of your shoulders. You still work at the mill. You are one of the old hands now. A survivor. You've seen owners come and go. Overseers retire. And generations of children pass through the roaring rooms. You've watched as some small, grudging changes have been forced upon the factory. The machinery now has a few crude guards on the most dangerous gears. Children under a certain age are, officially, no longer hired. The workday has been shortened to 10 hours. This is hailed as a great victory, a sign of progress. To you, who remembers the 14-hour days, it feels like a slight easing of a torture sentence. But it is not freedom. Your body is a map of your life. Your lungs burn with a persistent cough, the legacy of a childhood spent breathing in cotton dust. Your back is a constant, throbbing ache. Your legs, bowed from years of standing, protest every step. You move slowly, stiffly. You are a living relic of a brutal era. In the evenings, you sit in your small, rented room. You are alone. You never married, never had a family of your own. The factory didn't leave room for that. It demanded all of you. Your life has been one of survival, not of living. Sometimes, in the quiet, the memories come back, unbidden. They are not grand or dramatic. They are small, sensory fragments. The feeling of the cold, oily floorboards beneath your bare feet as a scavenger. The specific, high-pitched whir of the bobbins. The taste of the gray, watery gruel. The sight of Mary's mangled hand. The precise weight of the overseer's shadow falling over you. These are the ghosts that haunt you. They are not supernatural, they are the ingrained, physical memories of your past. They are the factory's brand on your soul. This long-term psychological impact is one of the most difficult aspects for historians to study. The official records, the ledgers and the reports don't capture the trauma that lingered for a lifetime. We can only infer it from the memoirs of the very few who learned to read and write and recorded their experiences, or from the tone of voice in the testimonies given to parliamentary committees. The historical debate here is often about the concept of agency. In retrospect, looking back at your life, do you see yourself as a passive victim, a helpless cog in a massive machine, or do you find, in your survival, a form of quiet resistance? The fact that you endured, that you weren't crushed, that you are still here is that, in itself, a victory. One of the more subtle legacies of this experience is a deep-seated distrust of authority, of promises, of anything that seems too good to be true. You remember the kindly man who recruited your family, the owner's fawning smile during the inspector's visit, the sermons about the virtue of hard work. You have learned it, through bitter experience, that words are cheap, and that power rarely, if ever, has your best interests at heart. You look out your small window at the sprawling, gaslit city. You know that it was built on your back. The magnificent town hall, the wealthy merchants' houses, the sprawling railway lines, all of it was financed by the relentless, underpaid labor of hundreds of thousands of people like you. You were the fuel for the engine of progress. You don't feel anger anymore. That burned out long ago, leaving behind a kind of weary, profound sadness. You are not a hero of a grand story. You are just a man who was a child once, a child who was fed to a machine. Your life has been one of countless, anonymous lives that were woven into the fabric of the modern world, as invisible and as essential as the threads you once pieced together in the deafening roar of the mill. You are a ghost of the factory. You carry its noise inside you even in the silence. You carry its dust in your lungs. You carry its aches in your bones. You survived, that you wonder, in the quiet of the night, what part of you was left behind, lost somewhere between the relentless turning of the gears and the merciless ticking of the clock. One evening, As you walk home from the factory, your path takes you past a newly opened public library, a grand brick building funded by the very industrialists whose fortunes were built in the mills. It's a place you've never dared to enter. But tonight, something propels you up the stone steps and through the heavy oak doors. Inside, it is silent, a reverent, peaceful quiet you have never experienced before. The air smells of old paper and wood polish. The young librarian looks up, surprised to see a man like you, with your worn clothes, uncalloused hands. In this temple of knowledge, she gives you a small, hesitant smile. You wander through the stacks, your rough fingers tracing the spines of the books. The titles are a foreign language to you. You are illiterate, like most of your generation of factory workers. The factory took your childhood before you had a chance to learn your letters. You find your way to a section labeled History and then Industrial Progress. You pull out a heavy volume, its pages filled with charts and diagrams. You can read the words, but you can understand the pictures. You see engravings of magnificent new inventions, steam engines, power looms, spinning mules. The machines are depicted as glorious, heroic. They are clean, precise, and powerful. There are no people in the pictures. Or, if there are, they are small, well-dressed figures, gesturing admiringly at the technology. There are no children with mangled hands. There are no bowed legs or stooped shoulders. There is no cotton dust filling the air. There is no fear, no hunger, no exhaustion. The history in this book is not the history you lived. You flip through the pages, a cold realization dawning on you. The story of the era has already been written, and you are not in it. Your pain, your labor, your survival, they are the invisible ink between the lines of the official narrative. They are the silent, unrecorded cost of all this celebrated progress. The great historical debate, you understand in that moment without needing to read a single word, will always be about this gap. The gap between the triumphant story of economic growth, technological innovation, and national wealth, and the quiet, personal stories of the human beings who paid the price for it, which is the real history. The charts showing rising coal production, or the memory of a child scream the statistics on textile exports, or the feeling of a strap against your back. A strange, almost forgotten detail of the era was the factory tourist. It became fashionable for the wealthy and educated to tour the great mills, to marvel at the scale and ingenuity of the new industrial world. They would be guided through the cleaner, safer parts of the factory by the owner, see the machines in action, and leave, impressed and amazed, with little to no understanding of the human reality of the workers they saw as mere appendages to the machinery. This book, you realize, is written from the perspective of that tourist. You stand there in the silence of the library, the heavy book in your hands, and you finally understand the full weight of your life. You and all the others, the silent, anonymous millions, you were not just cogs in a machine. You were the foundation. Every brick in this library, every rail in the sprawling network of railways, every bolt of cheap cotton cloth that clothed the world was built upon your stolen childhoods and your exhausted bodies. Your legacy is not written in books of history. It is woven into the very fabric of the modern world. It is in the clothes people wear, in the wealth of nations, in the unspoken assumption that progress is always worth the cost. You are the ghost in the machine, the silent testament to the price that was paid. You gently place the book back on the shelf. You don't need to read it. You lived it. You walk out of the quiet library and back into the noisy, gaslit streets of the city you helped to build. The air is cold, but for the first time, you feel a strange sense of peace. Your story may not be written, but it is not gone. It is everywhere. The factory feeds into the background now, its roaring engines softening to a distant, rhythmic hum. The sharp edges of memory begin to blur, the soot-stained bricks giving way to the softer textures of a dream. You can feel the tension leaving your shoulders, the constant ache in your back beginning to ease, as if cushioned by the very mattress you are lying on now. The clatter of machinery becomes a gentle, rolling sound, like distant thunder on a warm summer evening, a sound that doesn't threaten, but soothes. The air clears, losing its sharp, metallic tang, and instead carries the faint, clean scent of rain on dry earth, a fragrance from a life you'd almost forgotten. The tyranny of the clock dissolves. The rigid, unforgiving hands melt away, and time becomes fluid once more, a gentle stream carrying you forward into the deepened, quiet currents of sleep. The faces you knew, etched with weariness and fear, now soften in the dim light of your memory. They are at peace now, their long shift finally over. You can let them go. You can let yourself drift. You are floating now, untethered from the hard floor of the factory, rising above the tall chimneys and the smoke-filled sky. Below you, the city lights twinkle like a field of fallen stars, their harsh glare mellowing into a soft, welcoming glow. There is no more work to be done, no more bells to answer. There is only the stillness of this moment, the comfort of your bed, and the profound, heavy peace of a rest that has been earned 1,000 times over. You can close your eyes. You are safe. You are drifting. You are asleep. The end of the article. Good night,